Sir, Atlanta is building a massive facility that's being called Cop City. Now, a Georgia climate protest to protect the environment has turned violent in the city following the death of a local organizer. Atlanta-based Stop Cop City movement has been protesting the development, again, called Cop City. It is a public safety training center. The $90 million training facility was publicly announced in 2021 and would serve as a training center for Atlanta police and firefighters. The Mock City proposed site is the Weelaunee Forest. The forest serves as a green space and helps protect against environmental hazards. Protesters met at the intersection of fighting police expansion, gentrification, and the displacement of low-income residents. And the protest turned violent when police fatally shot an environmental activist named Tortuguita on January 18th as Georgia law enforcement worked to clear protesters from the site. Recently, morning of Tortuguita has turned violent with clashes between protesters and police. To break down what is happening in Atlanta, we have Camus Franklin, founder of Community Movement Builders, Inc. Camus, glad to have you on the show. So there's this Cop City. I've seen city officials talk about how it is important in terms of a training for first responders. What are you hearing from Black residents and others about this site that's actually chosen? Are folks against the site, or are they against Cop City regardless of where it's being placed?
It's both, actually. It's folks who are against Cop City no matter where it's going to be placed, because the idea of Cop City came after the 2020 uprisings across the country and internationally. And the elected officials decided to build Cop City, in their words, not ours, as a way to help the morale of the police department. And so the idea of Cop City is one in which it is a militarized police base, a militarized police center. They're going to have a space for a Black Hawk helicopter pad. They're going to have over a dozen firing ranges, a mock city to practice urban warfare, military-grade training centers. They're going to have spaces to detonate explosives. And not only is Cop City something that is going to train, so-called train Atlanta police officers, Georgia police officers, we just found out that 43% of the police officers that will be trained will be out of state. And then lastly, on the issue of Cop City itself, Cop City is Georgia police work in connection or with Israeli police in terms of giving training to Georgia police here in the United States. And so the tactics that are used against Palestinians are going to be exported here to the United States, and the tactics used against Black people by the police are going to be exported to Palestine. And so on the environmental issue that you brought up, this forest that's right adjacent to a community that is 70% Black, a working class community, was designated to that community to be a place where they're going to have trails, playgrounds, a creek for folks to go in the water, basically an area where was supposed to be given over to that community for their use and enjoyment. After the decision was made by the Atlanta Police Department, the mayor of Atlanta at the time, Keisha Lance Bottoms, now Mayor Dickens, and the Atlanta Police Foundation, they decided to wipe those plans off the map and instead to build this 380-acre complex where immediately they're going to destroy over 90 acres to build this massive militarized police training center.
Wow. So the protests are continuing?
The protests are continuing. And, we like to point out to folks that the protests started, as you mentioned, in 2021, when the idea of Cop City was released to the public. And those protests were met with violence right away from the police. So when the protests were in the street, at City Hall, on sidewalks, which you would consider everyday protests, we had protesters arrested, over 17 or 18 protesters who were arrested with resisting arrest, disorderly conduct. So the violence by the police against protesters started really at the very beginning of protests against this facility. And then they started to step up their tactics to the point where even before this young person was killed, Tortuguita, in December, the police went into the forest and did a raid, removing protesters who were practicing civil disobedience by being in the forest. I just want to note that these folks were not engaged in any other activity at the time of their arrest except being in the forest and staying in tree huts. These folks were pulled out of the tree huts. They were arrested and charged with domestic terrorism. These folks were charged with domestic terrorism, and then later in January, again another raid by the police. Again, and this time, folks were arrested and charged again with domestic terrorism, and this time they took the life of a protester. So it's the police who have been violent since the very beginning of this struggle, and even during their arrests, they used pepper spray, rubber bullets, and then finally they used live ammunition, which resulted in the death of a protester. They've spun a narrative now in which they're claiming that this protester shot at the police first, and then they returned fire. But we don't believe that narrative at all. We think that narrative is false, not only based on the history of police lying about what they've done in terms of their conduct and when they kill black folks, but also because the story just does not add up. People in the neighborhood said they heard a sudden burst of fire, not a one shot and then a sudden return of fire, but a burst of fire. This person was sitting in a tent by themselves, in a plastic tent by themselves. And so what makes no sense whatsoever that 12 or 13, being surrounded by 12 or 13 police officers, that they would just begin opening fire with one shot and then be shot. Lastly, the agencies involved in this included the Atlanta Police Department, the DeKalb County Police Department, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, by some accounts, even the FBI. None of these agencies are saying they have body camera image of what happened during the shooting. In fact, the Atlanta Police Department is required to wear body cameras and to have them on when they interact with the public. But somehow, in terms of going into forests, people who they're designating as domestic terrorists, they forgot or did not have on their body cameras to record incidents that they would have in terms of interacting with people. So we find that this is a ridiculous story that they're putting out to the public. And we're calling for an independent investigation because we don't trust the state, federal, or local authorities to investigate this matter.
3 minutes for questions. Ready to go.
Thanks, Kamal, for coming on. Can you talk to the public a little bit about the cost of this facility and where else this money could be going to in Georgia instead of policing, which we know does not actually reduce crime? Throwing money at policing doesn't reduce crime. We know that statistically.
This facility is right now has a price tag of $90 million. $60 million of it was raised through private corporations. The same corporations that during the 2020 uprisings were saying that they support Black Lives Matter, who were putting out all their marketing campaigns saying they supported Black Lives Matter. They're now giving money for this facility. $30 million is coming from the city itself. And again, to be clear, no one asked for this facility. 70% of the residents who called in on the day that the city council voted for this facility said they were opposed to it. 90% of the residents who live around the facility have said they are opposed to it. So Atlanta, a city that's suffering from gentrification, instead of putting money towards affordable housing, instead, Atlanta has decided to pay for this militarized training center to do nothing in our estimation except to harass the black community and to target movement activities so that there won't be other uprisings against police violence in the black community.
Congo.
What is the best way that those of us who do not live there can help this from actually happening?
There's several things that we're asking people to do. Like we're asking people to do social media posts, to do town halls and workshops in their areas, invite people who are talking about Cop City. We're asking people to do demonstrations and marches in support. We're asking people to call the DeKalb County Prosecutor's Office to demand that the charges of domestic terrorism gets dropped. We're asking people to call the mayor's office who has supported this. What's important to note here again, Atlanta, which claims to be the Black Mecca, it is under this Black Democratic leadership that Atlanta has gone from a overwhelmingly Black city, 60%, to one that is now 49% Black. One, again, that is gentrifying tremendously as they invite in these large-scale corporations and their workers, their middle-class workers, to replace the Black folks who built this city. So this is something that we ask folks to do, to be on the ground, to call the mayor, to call the city council, to divest from some of the corporations who are involved in this. And that is the only way that we're going to be able to stop Cop City.
Julian?
I'm interested and concerned about the erosion of the quality of life for people in the contiguous place contiguous to Cop City. You talked about the land being used for leisure, for swimming, the creek, et cetera. There are not that many opportunities for Black people in urban areas really to have that kind of leisure. Speak to me about the quality of life and what this means to have this sitting right next to a Black community.
I think
about 45 seconds, go.
I think in addition to the things I just mentioned, once they tear down this forest, the Southeast Atlanta, where this complex will be built, is famous for excessive flooding. Once they tear this forest down, there's going to be more flooding that's happening in this neighborhood. Again, they're taking away of people's ability to have access to green spaces, climate change, which is happening. This is going to do nothing but great damage. The noise pollution from the weapons that's going to be going off and the chemical weapon usage that's going to be leaked out into the larger community. This is nothing but a disaster for that working class Black neighborhood, which is adjacent to Cop City.
All right, come on. We certainly appreciate it, man. Thank you so very much.
Appreciate you having me.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.